The Hawk That Dare Not Hunt by Day, Chapter 26, written by Scott Odell. In mid-morning, Belsi came to the door, and guessing rightly that I had decided to agree to his offer, or at the least to consider it, he invited me out to eat. We walked some distance to an inn not far from St. Paul's, and there he ordered me a breakfast fit for an earl, herring and quail eggs, and a hot partridge pie, though eating sparsely himself. While I devoured my food, not having eaten properly for night on to 2 days, he talked some about the weather, much about the harbors of Amsterdam and Antwerp, testing my knowledge, I presume, and at last about my familiarity with the New World, of which there was considerable talk of late. I finished my partridge pie and could have eaten another if it would not have appeared unseemly. As a matter of fact, Belsi asked me to have a second helping, which, for appearance's sake, I reluctantly refused. "What are the dimensions of the Black Pearl?" he asked. 60 feet overall, 25 feet in the beam, and of 100 tons burden. For those not nautical, this meant that the ship could carry 100 double hogsheads of wine, or their equivalent in weight. "Not a big one," Belsi said. "As big as the ships of Christopher Columbus, his Santa Maria, and his Niña, and a sturdier ship by far than either." Belsi asked for ink and quill, and when they were at hand, he made a series of notations in a small book he carried in his cuff. In the meantime, I ate a delicious cake that the girl had brought me, apparently thinking from my wan looks that I was in need of it. "What are your thoughts on the spice trade?" Belsi asked. "I hear that it's profitable, gaining every day in popularity. Spices are being used in ladies' perfume, as well as to enhance the flavor of English mutton, which often has a moldy taste, and fish that is quite not fresh, it greatly assists." "Unfortunately," I said, aware that I was fast getting in over my head, "unfortunately the Portuguese have a monopoly on this trade." Belsi made another notation, then looked up and gave me one of his long, flat stares. "There's good money in slaves," he said. "How many could you contrive to carry on a voyage, say, of 6 weeks, from Hispaniola to London?" "I've never given it a thought," I said. "If you were to give it a thought, what would be your estimate? 50, 60, 20 women, 40 men? Would that be a fair guess?" "Close enough," I said. "They can be crowded into a small space," Belsi said. "Sleep on deck in all weather. Very hardy people, I am told, and also eat little except fruit." "But they don't do well in cold climes," I said. "Ships arrive in Spain with more than half the people dying. One caravel lost 93 of them, saved only one, a child of 5. Belsi was still making notes in his little book, pulling it out of his cuff, scribbling in it, closing it, and putting it back in a businesslike way. I did not bother to tell him that I would never captain a ship that carried slaves either as cargo or as impressed sailors. My father had not done so, Uncle Jack had not done so, nor would I. Nor did I tell him that my last wish in the world was to work with him as a partner, in any capacity or in any voyage that I could think of. He was not long in coming to the point. Having tested my knowledge of ships, rifling my sea bags, so to speak, he induced me into a good mood, or so he thought. By partridge pie, he presented his proposition bluntly. We had reached Charing Cross on our way back to the customs office and were waiting for a line of carts to pass when he said, "We can form a partnership, hold between us 60% of the company, and dispose of the rest as a handsome profit." "But I don't own the ship," I said, darting between the carts. of a more cautious nature, Belsey waited for a better opening. When he caught up with me, I continued, "Should I come into the ownership? Why should I present you with 30% of the same?" "Because," said Belsey without a moment's hesitation, "and I've already explained this to you, unless I do share in the ownership, the boat will be confiscated, and it will be turned over to the king's exchequer." "You have the power to do that?" "It's not a matter of power, young man. If the ship doesn't belong to Jack Barton or to Tom Barton, then it belongs, for the moment, to no one. Now, if this ship that belongs to no one happens to be suspected of smuggling goods in and out of London port for 2 years or more, and its unlawful activities can be proven by depositions from merchants who have received smuggled goods, then the ship is subject to seizure. Do I make myself clear?" We had reached the room where I had spent the night. Belsey opened the door and stepped aside for me to enter. The smell of smoke and musty straw assailed my throat. "Why am I being kept here? What law have I broken?" I asked. "You are a smuggler," Belsey said, "and so is everyone else. There's not a ship that goes in and out of London that doesn't carry smuggled goods." "True," said Belsey, "but some smugglers we catch." He closed the door and opened it again, thrusting his head in to say, "You can have a barrister if you wish. Shall I send you for one? He may be able to get you sent to Clink, to keep your uncle company. I would agree for you to go there should you wish. It's easy to get in, but difficult to get out." He started to close the door, paused, and said, "By the way, have you seen William Tyndale of late? No? Well, neither have I, but I'm hopeful." Belsey did not intend to send me a barrister, but in less than a minute he brought in a young man who meanwhile must have been waiting in the corridor. He was tall and handsome, with a full beard, curled hair, and a jeweled dagger at his belt. I had the feeling that I had seen him before. I was certain that our paths had crossed at some time, if only momentarily. I had the impression that he had the same thoughts about me. "My name is Henry Phillips," he announced at the moment that Belsey introduced him. "I'm familiar with your name. It is highly thought of on the river and in the lowlands." "Mr. Phillips here is furnishing the money for our enterprises," Belsey said, "and in consideration thereof will own an interest in the New World Exploration and Trading Company." "It has a name already?" I said, somewhat taken aback. With grave misgivings, flanked on one side by Herbert Belsey and on the other by Henry Phillips, and behind by 2 gentlemen dressed in finery and with the air of being high-born, I signed the document Philip now laid before me. We all signed it, one after the other, then crossed the street and celebrated the signing. Before I had finished my meal, I had made up my mind that my first voyage would not be to the New World, but to the warehouse in Antwerp where Tyndale's Bibles were stored. And my first act now, that I was a free man, would be to cross the river and learn what had become of my Uncle Jack. End of chapter 26.